Hi guys, it's Tara and welcome back to Crafting with Curly Cues. Today I'm going to share a mixed media project with you. So I have created this really fun May the Forest Be With You canvas, and this was a birthday gift for a friend of mine at work, and I work at the Department of Forestry, so it was the perfect sentiment. So to start, I have this flat 5x7 canvas, and I'm just going to go ahead and cover that with some of this Tim Holtz tissue paper. So this is just a good technique to get away from the intimidation of a blank canvas, because I don't know about you guys, but that scares the heck out of me when I'm sitting there with barely an idea, because I kind of start these things before my ideas are fully hatched, and staring at the blank canvas is just really intimidating. So I learned this tip from Vicky, and I apologize I say her name incorrectly, but Vicky Papanow, and I will link to her channel below. She is kind of, in my mind, the queen of mixed media, and just about everything that I do, I have learned from her. So I'll make sure that I link to her YouTube channel because she has some fabulous tutorials. So if you're wanting to try mixed media, I would definitely check her out. But she's where I learned that go ahead and cover this with some tissue paper, get rid of that blank canvas, and it's much less scary. So I have stuck my tissue paper down with some multimedia matte from Ranger, and I'm just using a disposable 1-inch sponge brush. I like to be able to just throw them away when I'm done, so I use those. And then once I've got everything on there, you could see I went on the back and I made sure everything was adhered on the back also. And then I went ahead and put a layer of that mixed, not mixed, the medium, the gel matte medium over the top of the tissue paper on the front. And this just gives you a non-porous surface to work with. And so you'll see that I do that a lot. Like almost every layer, I cover it back up with the multi-matte medium. So then I hit it with my heat tool because I'm way too impatient to wait for this stuff to dry. And then I'm going to take some gesso and I'm just going to go ahead and cover that up just to kind of push that design into the background a little bit so that when I put stuff on the top, it's a little bit muted, that pattern is. So gesso is kind of like a primer. You can get it in all different colors. I only ever use white. But it works really well both kind of as a white paint and then as like a primer for all your surfaces. So I went ahead and hit that with my heat tool, as typical, and then I'm going to bust out some paints here. So I have got this beautiful teal color from Dilutions. My light is like glaring perfectly on the top of it so you can't see it there. And then I have some distress paints. So this is the Broken China distress paint. Then I'm just going to use my finger and add a little bit of that slightly darker teal just to kind of make this blue a little bit more interesting. So now I'm just going to use my finger and I'm going to spread that around. So I'm kind of creating a sky for my forest here. So I use my fingers a lot when I do mixed media, which is pretty crazy because I am a pretty clean person. Like I don't like to be messy, but when I do mixed media, man, I jump right in there. So then I used a baby wipe and I kind of went over the top just to kind of make that a little bit less thick so you could still see that pattern. Adding more paint where I feel like I want it, and then when I get to the point where I like the sky, I'm going to go ahead and add some Mowed Lawn Distress Paint to the bottom, and this is going to be for my grass. So again, I'm just using my finger, and then I came in and I kind of flicked up the top of that paint a little bit, just to kind of give some grass texture to the line there between the sky and the ground. So obviously super like inconsistent, no fancy artistry going on here. I am using my finger for all, it's totally finger painting. Like it's kindergarten, right? It's pretty great. So once I've got the background kind of looking how I want it, I'm going to go ahead and hit that with my heat tool again and just make sure that everything's dry so I can move on to my next step. So you can still see like the lines where my fingers were. I think it adds texture. You can see where some of the tissue paper kind of crinkled. Again, it adds texture. It's mixed media, so all of it contributes and it doesn't have to be perfect. That is one thing that I love about doing this mixed media. It does not have to be perfect. So I found this stamp set that I have had for a while and I hadn't used yet. It's from Do Crafts Paper Mania, and it's the Folk Owl stamp set. And I am using some of these cute little florals that come in that stamp set to kind of add some interest to my ground here. So I'm just going to stamp some of those. I'm using Ranger Jet Black Archival ink for all of this, and that's because it's a permanent ink, so it's not going to move when I add more stuff on top because it's mixed media, so we're going to have lots of layers, so more stuff on top. And then there was this little kind of fern branch stamp, so I just kind of put some of those all over the place just to add some more texture and fun to my background. So it's really about just adding layers, just putting stuff on there till you get it to where you like it, and then putting more stuff on top of it. So I used my gesso, what was left on my craft mat there, to go ahead and add some kind of wispy cloud type texture to the background. And you can see I'm applying all my gesso with a makeup sponge. I use the disposable makeup wedges, and that works really well for me. Again, I can just throw it away when I'm done because I'm super lazy and I don't want to have to clean out any brushes. So that seems to have worked really well for me so far. So next I'm going to add some texture with some texture paste. And so I've got my Ranger texture paste, and then I have this really pretty branches stencil from Echo Park. And I just thought this was perfect to help me kind of set my forest scene. So I'm only going to have 3 trees in my scene, and so this stencil and these branches kind of coming in from the outside kind of just helps set the whole feel that you're in the middle of a forest, even though there's only 3 trees. So I thought it was super fun. Plus, obviously, the texture is going to add texture to the canvas, which is good. Like, again, mixed media, layers and layers and layers, and that's what you want. And this is another tip from Vicky. Like, Vicky uses all kinds of different textures on her mixed media projects, and it just gets this really cool look. So again, everything I do, I learned from her. So don't think that I'm all creative and original here. I definitely stole all of these concepts from Vicky. So anywho, you can see I'm going to put another layer of the multimedia matte. I can't ever remember which order that goes in, and it gets me all tongue-tied when I go to say it. So this is just going to once again make this a non-pour surface so that I can add things over the top and move ink around and that sort of stuff. And it's just going to kind of seal in everything that I've done so far. So now for the focal point, I have these adorable Tree-mendous dies from My Favorite Things. It's from one of their newer releases. And then for the stems here, I'm going to actually use some wooden paper, and that came in my Favorite Things Warm and Fuzzy Friends card kit. And then I had just some random pattern papers from my stash that were kind of greenish, so I used those to cut the trees out of. I don't even know what papers these are. They're literally just random ones in my stash. So that one I thought was a little too yellow, so I used some Forest Moss Distress Paint right over the top of it, and I'm just going to add that kind of olivey green color. And then I will come in with a baby wipe and take a little bit of that off so that you can still see the pattern of the pattern paper through the paint, but it just kind of made it a little bit less yellow and a little bit more of a greenish tone. So that was why that's the only tree I'm going to add paint to, but it's because it's the only pattern paper I had that wasn't quite green. So I'm using my multimedia mat to adhere all of these down, and so once I have the tree tops down, I'm just going to come right over the top and stick them all good and down with that multimedia mat, and then I will add the little tree trunks. And I think that the tree trunks cut out of the birchwood paper are super stinking cool. I think it's really awesome. So I have here, this is another Vicky trick that I love, and you can't super tell right here because this green is not super dark, but if you come in, this is a Pit Artist pen from Faber-Castell. So it uses an ink that dries permanent, but you have a little bit of time if you use it on a non-pour surface to move that ink around. And if you put it right up against your shapes, you can kind of create the shadows. So you put a little bit of the ink down and then you come in and move it around with your finger, and it just really makes those pieces pop off your page. This is my absolute favorite trick that I learned from Vicky. I think this is so cool. I had never heard of these pens before I started watching her channel, so I was like in awe when she started doing all these really cool things with these pens, and I had to go out and get a couple for myself. So and you'll see later that I'm going to do a lot more of that technique on the canvas to make everything really pop. So there's those adorable wooden tree stems. I think that's so fun. And then I'm just going to put that layer on top again of the multimedia mat to seal everything down. So now while that dries, I'm going to move on to my ground. So I'm just using a little tiny bit of gesso to put some white over the top of those flowers. And that's just going to create kind of a primer on top of that green so that I can use other colors and it'll really pop with that green grass. So now I'm going to go ahead and dry that so that I can color over the top of it. And then I'm going to come in with a couple different colors of those same Pit brush pens. Well, first I'm going to make that a non-pour surface with a little bit of multimedia matte, and then I'm going to come in and dry it again. And then I'm going to come in with my pens, and I am just using kind of a yellow and an orange and a red, and I'm just going to color in these little flowers on the ground. So again, I'm just making sure everything's dry because my pen was kind of sticking a little bit, and I don't want to ruin my pen, so I went back in and made sure everything was dry. So I'm just kind of randomly coloring these flowers. There's no real rhyme or reason here. And then for the bigger ones, I'm going to use kind of that slightly brighter orange color, and all of the colors that I'm using are listed in the supplies below and over my blog. So if you're interested in any of that, you can definitely check that out. And then I'm going to use this red one to come in and kind of add some shading to these smaller flowers that I've colored with these yellow colors. So this is a minor detail, but I think it kind of adds a lot to the canvas to have these little flowers in the grass and not just have a plain green ground there. I think it's just something that just kind of brings it to the next level of artistry, I guess you could say. So now I'm coming in with my green, and I'm really wanting to add some green shadows, but as you can see, my green is just not dark enough. So I'm definitely going to have to invest in a darker green because I have some other ideas for the sky and grass canvases. So I definitely need a darker green, but I didn't love what that was doing. I went and did all of it anyway, just because I wanted it to be consistent, but you can't really tell. So I'm going to come back in later and do some more work with that. So now I'm coming in with a blue that's just a little bit darker than the shade that I used on the sky, and I'm just putting some shading all around those trees, and you'll notice I'm only going where the trees are in the sky. So I'm not taking the blue over the grass, and I'm trying pretty hard not to take it over the clouds, but I do kind of mess up at one point later, you'll see, and I put the blue shadow over the clouds. And it's pretty obvious, but that's okay. Again, it's mixed media. Like, there's really no wrong answer. So that's just one thing that I love about mixed media. So then I decided to go ahead and not only add that blue shadow to the trees, but to really make these textured branches part of the canvas by adding the shadow around them as well. So that did take me a little bit, and it's kind of hard to get my finger in those little spaces to move the ink around. That right there, that's where I mess up and put the blue shadow right in the middle of the cloud. Oops. But if you just work at it, I just kept working at it, and I was able to get some really neat shadowing around all of those branches. So now I'm going to come in with my brown, and I'm going to add some shadow to the trees where the grass is, and then I'm also putting shadow underneath all the trees and all those little flowers in the ground, and I think that really just makes them stand out and adds a lot of dimension to this canvas. So now one of the final things I'm going to do, again, another tip from Vicki, is I'm going to take just a black fine line pit brush marker, and I'm going to go ahead and add the black lines back into all my images here. So I'm going to start by using the little flowers here and adding some of the lines and detail back in. I'm kind of looking at the stamp off to the side to see how to put some of that detail in, but really I just end up kind of scribbling on it because, hey, mixed media, right? So now I'm also going to add some lines onto these die cut trees and just kind of make them look nice and sketchy. I think that, to me, this is a characteristic that really defines mixed media, is this kind of sketchy, it's not cartoony, I don't know how to describe it, but to me, this is really what I think of when I think mixed media. I know there's all kinds of different mixed media, but just in my head, this is what I think of. So I really love adding this detail. I think it really adds a lot to the canvas. And then when you go back on top of it later and I'll add some white highlights, it really makes things pop, which I think is really fun. So now that my background is pretty much done, I want to add my sentiment. So I'm going to use this sentiment from the Forest Friends stamp set from My Favorite Things. Again, this came out recently, and I think this sentiment is too cute. I mean, obviously Star Wars is a big deal. It's a really big deal in my house, let me tell you. My husband is total fanboy when it comes to Star Wars. So when I saw this sentiment, so combining Star Wars and then the fact that I work at the Department of Forestry, it's just perfect. Like, I just had to have this stamp set just for this sentiment. And then we actually went on a work trip a couple weeks ago, and my friend at work, she organized the whole trip, and she made it the theme, May the Forest Be With You, because we went on May 4th. So I'm sure you guys have all heard May the 4th be with you, but she changed it to May the Forest Be With You, and she didn't know that I had this stamp set. So I surprised her because her birthday is on May 5th, so I made this canvas for her birthday with this same saying that she had put on this inspirational trip that we all went on at work that she organized. So I thought that was just too perfect. It's just, sometimes this craftiness, it just, you know, it's like it's meant to be. And the fact that I do these crafty things just really worked out in this instance. So Anyway, as you can see, I stamped it on some craft cardstock and then I trimmed it down and I adhered it right over those trees. And then I just went in with my big brush pen and added the shadows and then put a little square around it with my black marker. So now I'm going to come in with my white pen and I'm just going to add some white highlights. And this is a Vicky thing. It just really makes everything pop. I think it looks so cool. It adds that kind of extra dimensional element. I don't even know. It's just really cool. So I probably went a little crazy with the white when it came to the flowers. In retrospect, probably shouldn't have put quite so much white, but I don't know. You never know till you try, and it's just, who knows? Another night I might have loved it, but for some reason it just wasn't floating my boat. But anyway, it's there and it's good, and I think it looks really cool on the trees. So now for a final finishing touch, I am taking some little yellow rhinestones that I just happen to have in my stash, and I am going to place them in the middle of those flowers. So not the teeny tiny flowers, but all the medium size and the big flowers get a little rhinestone in the middle, which I think kind of detracts from some of the over whiteness that I had there. So this canvas is all done. I did notice a spot I wanted a little bit more shading there, but for the most part, this canvas is all done. So thank you guys so much for watching. Here's a beautiful close-up of all that texture and that wood, those wood branches and those trees. So cool. And then the final product. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please go ahead and subscribe. Leave me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it when you guys leave a comment. I love chatting with you guys. Check out the description box below for more crafty inspiration, including a link to Vicky's YouTube channel, and to join me on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Thanks, guys. Bye.